and welcome to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. Join us for interviews, updates and chat with artists, influencers and those that manufacture the gear that we love. Hello and welcome to 9 to 42, which is the podcast from the guys at the Guitar Show UK. And this is the first episode of the new year, except it's the third go at the first episode of the new year, if that makes any kind of sense. Jace, how are you?
I'm very good. Had a good week on the Guitar Show. Booked Luke Morley this week.
You did book Luke Morley.
So that's quite exciting. And and must confess that I'm late on sorting out podcasts because I don't have the mental capacity to deal with the Guitar Show in a month's time and do the podcast truthfully.
And I don't have the mental capacity to do the podcast and press the record button.
No, you don't.
Which is why the first effort at this, the first 15 minutes of this, has been lost in the void. And we're starting again. But great news about Luke Morley. I'm actually quite excited, but also quite nervous because you've landed me with that, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I know you're a big Thunder fan. So,
I'm a big Thunder fan.
Joel McIver messaged me yesterday and said, "Do you want me to interview Luke?" And I was like, "Oh." And then he told me he wrote their biography. So no pressure, but the guy that wrote the book with them, I've bumped for you.
Oh, right, okay. So I'm not worried now then, am I?
No.
In the slightest. We have Rosie from Turnstone Guitars with us. I mean, she's been with us a while, obviously. We've been chatting for a while. But as far as you're concerned, listener, we have Rosie from Turnstone with us. Rosie, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Again?
Yes, again.
How's your new year going? How's everything with you? How's 2023 started off?
It started off really well. It started off a little bit cold, as it probably is the same with you. You're a little bit further up north than me, but it's been pretty cold in the workshop. But that's kind of meant that we kept moving, so got lots going on, and so far so good.
And we've ascertained that you're somewhere near Gatwick, and you're not really sure exactly where from Gatwick, are you?
Well, we've ascertained that I'm east of Gatwick, under the flight path. So we can enjoy the every 3-minute rumbles, assuredly knowing that an aeroplane is flying over our heads.
And does that have any impact on your? I mean, because let's think about this: building acoustic instruments under a flight path, is that really a good idea?
I think it definitely has resonant properties. The rumbles of the aeroplane penetrate through the wood that we're working, kind of like an extreme torrefication process that supples the resins in the wood and basically makes our guitars so much better than anyone else's. Aerotone, it's called Aerotone.
That's all shit, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. We were talking when we had the first bit of the chat. I guess the question I asked you first was what was your first guitar? When did you start playing guitar?
Yeah.
And you told us you had an Aria. That was your first, wasn't it?
It was indeed, from a shop in St Albans.
Oh, which shop?
Down near the Horn. Is it called the Horn? The live music pub down there. Oh, I don't remember what it was called, but it was on a corner, not in the main part of town, just out town towards the railway station. Always surrounded by metal grates, like protection grates.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think what that shop was called. I think I've been in that shop, and I can't.
Was there a long time? You probably have.
It's called.
No, me neither.
Right. Okay. So, Jace, come on then. First guitar for you.
Hondo 2 Les Paul Custom with a bolt-on neck. And I didn't realise that it came off the strap once and hit the floor, and it flaked some of the paint off it. And actually, you could see that it was hollow, but filled with some kind of concrete material. Obviously, for the tone wood properties.
Right. Okay.
And yours was?
I had a Hohner Les Paul, which was this weird kind of. it went from one shade of grey to another.
Nice.
And I don't quite know why I settled on a Hohner Les Paul, because I don't even like Les Pauls.
You see, I'm convinced that that's the reason why I naturally gravitate towards Gibson scale length kind of guitars, because that was just the first one that I had.
Right.
Do you not like Les Pauls because they put you off it?
No, because I've tried since, and I don't like the distribution of the weight. I don't like the fact that they're neck heavy.
Mm.
They're not neck heavy. I mean, bloody Les Pauls.
It's heavy.
The Les Paul is like 400 pounds of body on one end and a neck on the other.
It seems to drag down. It just all seems just really. It just doesn't. It doesn't sit properly. It falls in the wrong place for where my hands want to go.
That's because you haven't got your foot on a monitor. If you had your foot on a monitor, Les Pauls make perfect sense.
Right, right. And then, to be honest, at the music shop called Berries in Worksop, which was a traditional music shop with about 4 or 5 guitars in it, they clearly hadn't thought that through, had they?
No.
Or there would have been like a knackered HH wedge monitor on the floor for me.
Well, they shouldn't. I've always said that guitar shops should have mirrors, because you want to know that it suits you. I bought, because as everybody knows who listens to this podcast, I was a big Kiss fan. I bought one of the Paul Stanley. It's not an Iceman, it's a PS10. He's very specific about that. Looks like an Iceman. And I got it home, and we went to rehearsal, and the rehearsal room had got mirrors, and I looked at myself and went, "You look a dick." And it's like, if I'd have had a mirror in the shop, I wouldn't have bought it.
Well, that seems fair. Seems fair. So, Rosie, always acoustic for you? Flirt with electric?
I have flirted with electric.
You were unfaithful for a while, were you?
I was unfaithful, but then I saw the errors of my ways and reverted back to being a wholesome acoustic player again.
A wholesome acoustic player. Right.
Which electric was it? Telecaster?
Well, my first one was a Squire with a Sunburst. And then my second one was a Schecter Guitar Research. Orange guitar, which I bought in New York at the Guitar Centre there. Flew it home with me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I bet those Schecters then would have probably been, handmade in California at the time?
Yeah. You're asking me now. It must have been like 15, 20 years ago. 16 years ago. Yeah, about 16 years ago. So maybe, I can't remember. But it was nice. I really liked it. And I wasn't actually looking to buy it, but just the tone just stood out to me. I tried, because they had tons of guitars on the wall there. And I kind of had my heart set on a PRS. Well, I couldn't afford it, but my dream guitar then was the PRS with the birds flying down the headstock. But I think I tried some Gibsons and Les Paul style guitars, and just this one had the bluesy crunch. So I was just like, no, that's what I want.
So you play electric guitar, then you move back to acoustic.
Yeah. So I played at university. I did some lessons in Liverpool above the Dawson shop, and leaving university, not playing in a band anymore, I kind of just naturally retreated back to acoustic playing and using that as my kind of support for singing songs and going to open mic nights and stuff.
So who are your influences then? What's your style?
So I think back then I would have said kind of that kind of singer-songwriter that was popular around the late 90s, and kind of Eva Cassidy, Sheryl Crow, Alanis Morissette. But then the electric stuff was definitely more bluesy. Like, I love artists like B.B. King and Jimmy, and I mean, I nowhere near kind of would say that my playing is influenced by them, because they're just ridiculous. But yeah, definitely a bluesy bent to that, which I guess kind of then came back into my acoustic playing a little bit as well.
Because I scrolled back through your Instagram for several years and watched the videos of you playing, I would have sworn you'd have gone, folk was kind of like the first sort of thing.
Yeah, which is strangely because folk, I like traditional folk. I still would say kind of doesn't massively float my boat, but I guess kind of the singer-songwriter came out of folk. I mean, Joni Mitchell, again, I was late to the party with her, but obviously she's, I wouldn't maybe say a huge influence on what I was doing because, like I say, I don't think I really wasn't that familiar when I was first started to write my own songs. But I definitely think like Sarah McLachlan and these artists that came definitely were the follow-on from the folk movement. So I guess, in a sense, it is all derived from folk.
I'm a huge Sarah McLachlan fan.
Oh, really?
Absolutely fantastic. And the first time I heard, I wasn't right at the start, but I got into her with Fumbling Towards Ecstasy, which is just still is the most phenomenal record.
Yeah, I agree.
And she had something going on. There's a real, real kind of slightly dark, slightly brutal edge, to particularly to her lyrically. But no, she was great. But it's all very, very strong artists. That maybe taking Eva Cassidy aside a little bit, but I mean Sheryl Crow, Alanis Morissette, very, 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 very sort of definite style, and I could see how they all flow out of the Joni Mitchell thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's actually I haven't really thought about that until you said, but I mean it's obviously like it's a thing that's kind of a movement from something going. Music is always changing, but it definitely. You can see the influences there now when you actually think about it.
And three very distinctive sounds as well. All three of them, because it's hard to really, you go back to that first Sheryl Crow album, and you don't realise the impact that had when it first came out. Really interesting sound. I mean, obviously the Alanis Morissette album just tore the rule book up when it came out, and I think probably if the Sarah McLachlan one was more of a slow burn, I think if more people would have heard that, I think that would have had a greater influence as well, because that was a really different sound. I think she was, for some reason, she's never had the impact in the UK. I think that she hasn't had in the US and Canada, which is a shame. But she has toured here. I've seen her play here. But just doesn't. I actually found out about her through. Do you remember the film City of Angels? I do.
She sung obviously the song Angel, which everybody knows. But I accessed her through that soundtrack, and then I would find quite a lot of artists actually through soundtrack albums, because back in the day it was quite difficult to kind of find new artists. But if a soundtrack came out, you suddenly had 15 songs of artists potentially that you didn't know, that you could then go and explore and go to the CD shop and look up those artists.
And actually, it's a fantastic soundtrack album, that one, because it's got the Goo Goo Dolls on it, which obviously, again, a lot bigger in the US probably than over here, but with obviously Iris, which then just became massive and everywhere. Yeah. But there's a fantastic Peter Gabriel song, I think, called I Grieve on there, which is also absolutely tremendous.
Okay, and Alanis Morissette, Uninvited.
Which is an incredible tune, Uninvited. Yeah. So, I mean, unusual to have such a collection of really great songs on a... Because it's a rom-com, basically, isn't it? I mean, it's not, it didn't worry the Oscars particularly, but in terms of the soundtrack, there's some really amazing music on that. Yeah, on that soundtrack. When did the interest transfer to the day job? Because I'm only guessing, but I'm guessing you didn't finish wherever you were, Liverpool, I think you said, and then start building guitars.
No. So it was a period of about 5-6 years in between, so I studied marketing at university, and that kind of came about through not really kind of knowing that that's what I wanted to do, but more kind of feeling like I needed to do something, and that seeming like maybe a good open choice for kind of future prospects to study something like business. And then that's kind of then drilled down into working within the charity sector in fundraising. So I was working in London at St John Ambulance, and the interest in guitar making came in a roundabout way of me trying to find something that was kind of would let my creativity and the music side of me come out again, because I felt like it had all kind of gone away. And it just so happened that there was an evening course for guitar making at the London Metropolitan University, which was about 20-minute cycle ride away from where I was working. So I literally just signed up to it and started going on a weekly basis, and it all kind of spawned from there. But before, I guess, kind of like what made me even think of that was I had a 12-string guitar, an acoustic guitar, which said, and I've looked up this brand and I can't find it, but it was called Lakeland, not to be confused with Lakewood, which is a German acoustic brand, but Lakeland, and it said made in the Lake District, which then I thought, oh, guitar made in England, that's a really funny thing, because I just, like, probably like most people, assumed most guitars were either made in the Far East or in America. So then that got me thinking, well, let me learn a bit more about guitars being made in this country, finding out about Patrick Eggle, Roger Bucknell, so then I started to investigate the prospect of guitar making, and I was always quite good with my hands, but hadn't really had a chance to utilize anything since school. And obviously I had kind of the love for playing acoustic, so it was more just marrying two things together and just kind of going along and seeing if I might enjoy it, and then it just all kind of spawned from there, slowly but surely, really.
How long was the course?
Well, it was ongoing, but they said at the time, because you would imagine that you'd just, like, I think everybody signs up to the course thinking you'll float in for 2 terms, come out the other side with a perfectly formed acoustic guitar and the skills to start a career. Well, hey, it doesn't start like that. So the first term, I think I learned how to square up a neck. So I was like, okay, I'm in it for the long haul now. I did that course for 2 years, but I didn't actually finish a guitar. But after a year of doing that, then I started doing an internship with a maker. Well, I went to Denmark Street on weekends. There was Luthier's Corner. There's a lady called Celine Kamerlink. She worked with a guy called Dave King, who's a luthier.
Oh, Dave.
They had, I always thought you might know him. They had a repair shop. And I just wanted to get a bit more experience. So I was doing my evening course, and I thought, I want to get a little bit more experience. Let me go to Denmark Street and see if there's somebody I can just help on weekends. And so I started helping Celine out on Saturdays. And then, I did that for a year. So then 2 years into a year into doing that and 2 years into the course, then I got an internship, which then I went part-time with my work to do that. So that's when I kind of moved on from those things and just started the internship and did that for another 2 years. And then set up my own workshop 2 years after that. So kind of 4 years in the making of part-time training, and then moving into part-time working for myself.
Was it way more difficult than you'd expected it to be?
Yeah, absolutely. But the weird thing was, like, normally, I mean, I wouldn't I think most people might say that I'm not I've never been to stick to my guns with something this difficult. But for some reason, even guitar playing, like I can see what needs to be done, the practice that needs to be done to become good. But I just could, to a certain degree, I just couldn't, sit down and just do it over and over again to take myself to the next level. But for whatever reason with this, I could, or, I could put in the time, and it clicked with me to the point that I could push myself to go beyond what seems reasonable to keep going.
So are you saying that normally you're a bit flaky?
Possibly.
I'm fine with that. I'm very flaky.
But so for some reason with this I wasn't, and I just kept at it. But yes, a lot harder than you imagine it to be. Just there's so many aspects. I won't go into it, but there's just a lot more to it than you could ever imagine.
I remember chatting to Richard from Santa Cruz Guitars at a NAMM show once, and he said, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was like, if a plumber charged you the same hourly rate if a guitar maker charged you the same hourly rate as a plumber would, when it build not electrics but building acoustics and all of that, tapping the tone and shaping the bracing and all that, it's like the average acoustic guitar would cost something like £25,000.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, because I haven't made guitars. I've bolted together tons of part casters of bits of, and it's a relatively simple thing. You can press the CNC and a Telecaster body shape comes out with all of the holes drilled and everything. But acoustics is just way more complicated. And I was kind of researching it, and you've done the E series, the English woods, which I think is a really nice thing. So I was going to ask you about that. But the thing that struck me was there's a lot of wood out there, and without wishing to get into a huge tone debate, is there just like a ton of, like, you make a guitar out of, I don't know, you or something, and you finish it and you go, oh, it sounds a bit shit, and you've got to start again.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of process you've had to go through with the E series?
Yeah, and so to begin with, that was kind of my premise, that it may sound terrible, so I kind of want to keep it a bit on the DL that I'm doing this in case I don't actually want to push it. So right at the beginning, I made a full E series, traditional wood, more traditional wood model side by side, so that I could kind of know that they were the same size. This isn't hugely scientific, so I'll put a caveat on that. But building it side by side, just so I can at the end play them together and kind of hear the nuances of the tone. And what my conclusion just from that initial process was, the English guitar, it does sound different, and that's the thing. It's kind of, it doesn't have that traditional sound, but in my mind, the sound was good. It was responsive. It was warm. It was kind of the woods that I'd used kind of had like a great mellowness to it that was an enjoyable tone. So that was where I was kind of like, okay, I think I'm onto something. But yeah, you're right. It's what you start to kind of think is, well, it takes me such a long time to build a guitar. Do I want to kind of be that experimental? Because at the beginning as well, like, the build process is slow. It's not like you can just say, well, I'm going to build 10 guitars and throw a few aside. When you're starting, it's very slow. So you kind of have to be careful about what you use, because you don't have the time, and you don't have the resources to waste, like, things to just say, oh, that went wrong, never mind. So to a certain degree, you have to be careful about what you choose. So I started by choosing woods that I knew had been used. So walnut has been used in many regions. Cherry has been used. Yew I used because another maker had used it. So it was all kind of like, I wasn't just randomly picking woods. I was thinking about the properties of them. I was thinking, how am I structurally going to support these woods as well? So I always kind of knew at the beginning that I was hopefully in the right direction. What I've often found with new woods is that, oh, okay, that's good at that, or it's not good at that, or certain playing styles, it excels, or it's not so good. So I go, yeah, I certainly think, okay, it works for this, maybe not for this. So now I know how to guide its use for future custom orders, if that makes sense. Yeah. But as far as kind of it saying, oh no, that didn't work to any degree, I'd like to think that that hasn't happened, because I've always tried to make conscious decisions to avoid like that was completely the wrong wood, because I shouldn't be making that decision in the first place.
So when you're training for the 2 years and then 2 years of an internship, and I would imagine a lot of it is like, this is how you square a neck and blah 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 and all that sort of stuff, and use your chisels and all that sort of stuff. But is there an element of having to have like ear training as well? Because I've played guitar for like 35 years, and I go, yeah, that acoustic sounds nice. I have no idea why it sounds nice, or that it sounds any different. I can hear that an expensive acoustic sounds better than a cheap acoustic. I don't know why. Do you have to go through that sort of process as well?
That's an interesting question, because I think my has to come from somebody else, because I'm too close to it. Obviously, I know what I like, and actually it's very good to try other people's instruments to get that kind of perspective. To be surrounded by your own instruments completely all the time, I think you do to lose perspective of whether you think it's whether you know it's good or not. So firstly, I try to get feedback. Shows like, the guitar show and all that kind of stuff is perfect to get a lot of people playing guitars, and they're often not shy to say what they like and don't like about it. That's really, really useful. Playing other people's guitars, hearing them play it at you, because again, the way I play with my flesh. And so sometimes it can sound like I'll play one of my guitars and be like, oh, like certain notes are jumping out or sounding a bit muddy, but then somebody else will play in a different position to me and it'll sound completely different. So it is difficult to develop that sense of, because it's such a subjective thing. Like, how do you start to just kind of determine, one, where do you want to go with your tone, but equally, how do you even assess kind of how it sounds, because there's so many variables.
Yeah. So when someone places an order with you, I'm assuming it's not a kind of, I've got it in stock, here you go, put it in a case, send it off to them. It's like a whole process of, a custom built guitar within certain parameters of your range, I would assume. So I'm assuming you ultimately have to interview them into what they're expecting to receive. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's a whole load of questions that you have to go through, some of which it can be easy or it can be quite difficult. So they can have quite an idea of, or they can give you information that's quite clear, or sometimes it can, there's different strands of conversation, kind of like, well, what's your background with playing? So sometimes they don't have that many instruments, sometimes they have loads. That can be a determinant of where you want to go with another instrument. Do you want something the same? Do you want something different? What kind of music you play? They can sometimes give you videos where but again, do you see them in person? Are you talking over email? So it's definitely, that is as much of a skill in itself for guitar makers to be able to kind of communicate effectively with customers to get that information out, but equally understanding how different backgrounds, but also kind of where they're coming from to determine what they're looking for in an instrument, if that makes sense.
Do you ever sort of like chatting to someone, and I don't know, just they're like, I'd really like a jumbo acoustic, but what I play should be played on a triple O size or something, and you're like, no, it needs to be this model when you're talking to them, but they won't have it, and they end up purchasing something.
Not to that extreme, I don't think, with regards to size, but I'm just trying to think maybe with regards to tone, that like, so they play in a certain style, but they're talking about, a wood combination that maybe doesn't suit that style. That maybe could be an instance where that happens. In which case, again, that's a bit of an art into trying either to, because you're kind of like, well, maybe, I've still got a lot to learn, that's to be said. So you're kind of, sometimes you're thinking, well, actually maybe it could work for that style. But then sometimes you're like, well, I know that this, I know what I can build with this could deliver that. So, your past experience is informing what you're guiding people. But then you're sometimes just the inquisitive nature. If somebody does throw a curveball at you, sometimes you are a bit like, maybe that could be interesting,
So, I mean, it must be a complete minefield to deal with. Do you end up, and because I know very little about acoustics, which is terrible, really, but did you end up tuning them slightly differently for, like, the same model tuned slightly differently? Is that something you can do?
So I've experimented with like noting what the tunings are of the plates. So that's getting kind of geeky as to what the more you remove from your braces, the tone of the top or the back will drop, increasing the flex and dropping the note. So I played around. There's only like certain parameters, to a certain degree, you have the ability to manipulate that. So that's like kind of the first thing to say, is that you can't, your bracing pattern obviously is a massive important thing, and that's kind of set in place. You can remove wood, but to a certain degree, you only got so much power to manipulate. So that's kind of like what I've learned as well. And you also kind of, you can't manipulate it, or you can't remove so much material that you've lost structural integrity. So you've got all these factors in play, and what I have done is kind of listened to how the notes have dropped, specifically on the top and the back, as you've removed material, and kind of noted them, and then gone on to say, well, how has that guitar progressed into an instrument and the outcome of that. But yeah, it's more just kind of like data collection more than anything, because interestingly, you can carve a back exactly the same, but if it's a different piece of wood, you're dealing with a different mass and the different properties of the wood. So your note is going to be different before you've even started. So there's like, again, when you start to go into all these things, you can get a bit frustrated because there's just so many variables that you can't really control.
Does that mean if somebody comes to you and said, oh, you built me this, it's great, but I need a second one and I want it to be exactly the same, that you kind of have to throw your hands up and say, I'm sorry, it's just...
Well, if it's to be exactly the same, then you probably could. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to kind of say, well, the wood is going to be different, the top is going to be different. So yeah, I can't guarantee that it's going to have it. And also, your guitar has been played in for 2 years, so you're going to get the new one. It's going to sound like, because you always say it's the worst it's ever going to sound when you first play it. So they now in their heads have got that sound. So you just say, well, okay, it's going to be different. So yeah, to a certain degree, but you would say, I think I could now confidently say the character of the guitar will be the same.
So, yeah. I love that, by the way. That's all the way back to your business school tricks, or not tricks, but learnings there. That kind of, it's going to sound the worst it's ever going to be as I hand it to you and take your money.
Absolutely.
I think that's...
Enjoy.
That's really, really, really clever. I mean, clearly this is your calling. I mean, just the way you talk about it, just you know, the fact that it hit straight away, and you were like going to put the hours in. Has, in terms of the instruments you build, is that in your head what you thought those instruments would turn out like? Are you, or has it developed from that? You know, because I'm assuming at some point when you started that course, you thought you sort of thought down the line and thought it's going to be me effectively with my name on a guitar. You know, is what you're actually producing now what that picture in your head was?
Weirdly, I think when I first started, I kind of imagined. Okay, so I think I had started and I'd gone to visit Santa Cruz, Sir Richard Hoover. Went to his workshop in Santa Cruz, and I was just like, yeah, that's it, that's me. I'm gonna do exactly that. And then kind of as you start to grow the company, I think he's been in business for, I'd say, about 50 years now. Then you start to think, okay, I can understand why it's 40 years, because to get to that level just takes a significant amount of time. But I think even prior to that, when I was starting to dream about, potentially a guitar company, I was thinking, I'll get my designs and then it will all go off to the Far East and I'll like my brand. The concept of lutherie only really bloomed for me when I really started to learn the real detail of it and fall in love with that. So that kind of actually, in a weird way, followed. That then I started to think, oh no, like making it myself, hand building, that's the actual true. That's what I'm loving about it. Not kind of the thought of wanting just to mass produce something. So in a way, I guess, no, it didn't. What I'm doing now wasn't originally kind of when I first started it, but it has kind of like, maybe ask me in 20 years. I don't know. Things, are constantly adapting, but I'm certainly kind of I'm not doing exactly what I originally thought, but probably quite swiftly started to see that this might be the way that it would go.
And that's really interesting when you said about lutherie versus sending a load of designs off, which essentially is manufacture, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
In terms of you draw something, you send it away, it comes back, you have a look at it, you tweak a little bit, you send it back. That doesn't feel like anything close to what you're doing.
No, and also having the workforce as well, an external workforce. or what I think the way that it works in the Far East is that there's just a fleet of workers that work on different brands, or that I know that's what some people have done. But yeah, having that's a whole different kettle of fish that I wouldn't even know how to navigate, like how you would work with in that situation. But yeah, no, I mean that definitely wouldn't appeal to me now.
And yet, if you go back to your degree, almost that's the path that your training would take you on.
Yeah.
Because all the other skills you would need to market and distribute and all those kind of things, that's ultimately where you start in a kind of way, isn't it?
And that's interesting that you say that, because that's probably where that whole mindset came from. Was you build the brand, you have the product, you deliver it to market, and then actually it was like, oh no, actually there's something within the product that's even more interesting.
So did because we should mention Carl, who we've seen hovering around in the background and shouting east, not west of Gatwick. So Carl now works for the business, doesn't he? Was he a guitar maker as well?
No,
before?
So we met each other because we both he worked at St John Ambulance at the same time that I did, and he worked in IT. And so I then started my evening course. I think just not so long after we first got together, and so he's kind of been on this whole journey initially as a kind of a moral support. And then starting the business, obviously he came and helped me, or just looked around my premises, which I've been here since the start. I've kind of grown, but this actually the room that I'm sat in was kind of the first room that I rented. Kind of talking about problems with the build. Obviously you're hit daily when you're learning. You hit daily with mind-bending, confusing aspects of the build that quite often you just need to talk through with somebody. So even though he wasn't building guitars, he would often have quite a much more than a normal person, a good understanding of all the different aspects to the build. And then obviously coming along to shows with me, I would have my guitars, I would talk about them. So then if I needed to go to the toilet or something, he would then start talking about it. So I think it was just kind of a natural kind of thing for us to then just start working a little bit more together. But then it came to a point where we were starting to think, well, actually, no, I was just remembering the kind of the push into actually helping me was when we took our spray finishing in-house, which is a whole kind of another mind-bending, stressful job that I just needed somebody to say, if we're going to do this, if you can do this with me, which now he's subsequently gone on to he is the person that does it for me, that this is where I need help and we can start to maybe work together. That at the end has developed into other parts that he's now was starting to get involved in, to the point where he went part-time with his work. And then kind of like me, I was part-time with my work for a while just to kind of keep the bills juggled, and then he did the same part-time and then full-time, and then now we're kind of like venturing to new things that he's getting more involved in and I'm kind of stepping back from, because again that's kind of I always thought was important for us to have our parts that we are kind of in charge of, so that we can say that no, that's my part, that's your part, so you're not always kind of like treading on each other's toes and stuff.
I'm really pleased actually in just the way you explain that, because for a minute I thought, is this like teachers or police officers, where teachers marry teachers and police officers marry? And I thought, well, if luthiers marry luthiers, that's a really small pool to fish in, isn't it? So at least that's not a thing, which is quite, I don't know why I would worry about that, but I would probably go away and worry about that.
You'd worry about the children.
Well, yes, there is that, and their strange fascinations as kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I shouldn't get concerned about things like that. But there we are.
No,
so what's next?
What's next? Well, so I think we've got kind of a busy year ahead of us. We're upping our production a little bit. So guitars are kind of moving through the workshop faster. We're getting more done, because we're going to have a few stock models. And again, this is kind of like when you don't it's nice to have a small amount of instruments coming through, but sometimes you can't, like, for example, go to the guitar show this year because we don't have guitars. But it's nice to kind of up production to a certain degree, because then you've got guitars to go and do new things with, like prospect artists or go to guitar shows. So we're going to have a few stock this year. So we're going to see what we're going to do with that, as far as maybe putting it into some artists' hands and things like that. Shows wise, we're still kind of recovering from COVID a little bit. They don't seem to be up to full speed yet, nor are we kind of in a position to go out to many, but we might have with stock, we might be able to go out to some shows later this year. No new models or anything kind of that aspect this year, but more just kind of still drilling down our processes in here and getting things kind of moving nicely and just kind of back up to speed after having a baby last year as well.
Right. Talking of artists, when I'm doing my other job, I work with Tristan.
Oh, nice.
And I've seen many of his videos of him playing your guitars.
Yeah, he lives about half an hour away from here, so...
Yeah, he's got a really long commute into Birmingham.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I see him a couple of days a week.
Oh, I didn't realise he came up that often.
Yeah, well, I think he must stay overnight, just do like 2 days in the office sort of thing.
Okay.
He's a phenomenal player, though, isn't he?
Yeah, lovely guy.
Yeah, I should ask him if he wants to do the guitar show one year, really.
Probably should. Speaking of guitar shows and back up to speed, one guitar show is very much back up to speed, Jason.
Yeah, it is. It's about 18% bigger than last year's show, which is really cool. The ticket sales are tracking above where they should do. So, yeah. And new venue, which I'm really quite excited about.
I was sad to hear about the hall burning down.
Yeah. I mean, it was horrible for them. Horrible for the 50 weddings that they had to cancel that were going to go on. And then I don't know. I haven't spoken to them for a couple of months. I did get a Happy New Year message off them. I'll pop back and have a look at where they are, but there was no way it was going to be ready for February. But the new place, I think it has the potential to work even better, really. It's all on the ground floor now. The acoustic room is much bigger and it's almost full right now, which is really cool. And I've gone from 150 car parking spaces to 550. So that will alleviate one of the main problems with Bingley Hall, really. So fingers crossed, touch wood and everything, It should be okay, he says. And I hate this period of the year. Absolutely hate it.
Oh, it's going to be fine. Stop faffing about. You've been doing it for forever.
I am fully aware of this. It doesn't get any easier.
Oh, here we go.
Because it doesn't matter how organised I am, I have to deal with 120 exhibiting companies that aren't as organised as I am.
They're all lovely and everything will be fine. Rosie, thank you very, very much for your time. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And hopefully we'll see you soon. In the flesh at something. I'm sure there'll be an opportunity. We ought to just thank our sponsors.
Yes, we should. We should thank Focusrite, and this is made using a Scarlett 2i2. And also, I've got to start doing the thanking Reverb over the next 3 episodes when they send through the words for sponsoring
the live stage.
Yeah.
Well, we'll say thank you to Reverb in a kind of non-wordy way then. Kind of tar.
Yeah.
Tar
Cheers, mate.
Reverb. Yeah, that'll do. Right, in which case, I will see you next time.
All right, see you soon, mate. Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. If you've enjoyed the show, then please remember to hit the subscribe button and share with other like-minded souls. For more information about 9 to 42, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram at the Guitar Show UK. This has been an A Short Stories production.